Dr. John Sarno was a pioneer in psychosomatic disorders. And what I'm learning about is how he related uh, psychological and emotional repression to chronic pain. And his whole theory was that we chronic pain does not come from physical problems in your body. It comes from repressed emotion, um, that the brain is the conscious brain is repressing um, anger, rage, sadness from the unconscious mind. And to distract us from those emotions, it sends us physical pain. And I'll bring up a little visual that he uses. I'm watching one of his lectures um, online. And so there's the brain, there's the conscious mind, and the unconscious mind. There's pain, and I'm delving so deeply into this because I've had 6 years of chronic back pain throughout my 20s, and I feel like I've done everything physically to get to the root of this problem, but nothing has helped. Um, MRIs really show nothing. I have bulging disc, like a little bit of like a bone fissure, but it's nothing that is abnormal, really, in people who are getting older. And if you're active, if you play sports or anything, there's a very good chance that you have a herniated or bulging disc as well and feel no pain. And so I've been for the last almost 2 weeks just completely consumed by this odyssey to understand these repressed emotions that I definitely have and why they're creating pain in my body. And basically, first of all, rule out if there is a true physical problem that you're having. So that's anything like bulging disc, ruptured discs, and stuff from MRIs. That really shouldn't cause pain. That just kind of causes more confusion. Um, rule out anything serious. But besides that, if you have gone to doctors, if you have tried everything physical and nothing works, there's a very good chance that it is this TMS, which is psychological pain coming from um, repressed emotions. And the pain is real. So this doesn't mean that the pain is not real. It is real. It's a physical brain sensation that you feel physically in your body. Um, but it does not mean that your body is broken. That doesn't mean that anything is wrong with your body. It just means you need to rewire your brain to understand that you know what's happening and you can face those emotions and you could air them out and you could understand them instead of repressing them in the unconscious mind. So, looking at this graph or this visual, there's the brain, there's the conscious mind, the unconscious mind. So, TMS pain um, is created because the brain is repressing rage in the unconscious mind. And rage is definitely a strong word, but I'll explain why it makes so much sense to me, why it kind of struck me today that this is definitely the case. And rage can come from many things. Um, Three biggest being like anger and childhood anger. Um, Personality traits, the need to be perfect and good, and the realities of life all unconsciously contribute to this cumulative rage that is being repressed. So, yeah, this book, The Divided Mind, Dr. John Sarno wrote 3 books, and this one is really incredible. I am loving it because the first one I read of his was Healing Back Pain, and that is a great one to start at. I would definitely recommend reading that first. You could actually watch it on YouTube, listen to the whole thing. It's pretty short. But this one gets more into the history of it and the kind of deep psychology of Freud and the the ways our mind works on a much deeper level. And I think that's quite fascinating. So I'm just gonna kind of talk about a couple of things that he says in the book. So to get over this chronic pain, it takes more than just realizing that, oh, this is actually just TMS in my body. This is actually just my brain. There's nothing wrong with me. If there's any doubt, it will not work. If you have any doubt there is something physically wrong with your body, it will not work. So he says, it is one thing to accept the concept that the mind has great power over the body, but quite another to internalize that knowledge and to understand it on a deeply personal basis. Even when my patients come to fully appreciate the central element of the equation, that is, that their mind contains the root cause of their physical distress, they may continue to stumble over the secondary details, unable to accept the reality of their own buried rage, and remain puzzled over the fact that their own mind could make decisions of which they're unaware. And it isn't easy to fully accept this. For the last 6 years, I've been trying to physically fix my body, but nothing has worked. And it took me getting to my lowest low um, about 2 months ago, where it was a month of pretty much pure pain. I had 3 flare-ups. I was just in constant pain. I could not live my life. And it asked me to really look at this situation from a different level, a different place. And by some divine miracle, I was introduced to this other person who had healed through this mind body connection and understanding. And she's kind of been guiding me on this path since then, and has really just got me on the road to understanding. Wow, I have a lot that I've not worked through. And again, today was just a reminder of that, which I will speak about shortly. um, so what I'm doing is I'm using the Curable app to guide this, so that walks me through education all about TMS. And it's not just Dr. John Sarno. He was the pioneer, but there is a lot of literature and um, testimony and cases and other people who are doing work on this mind body connection as well. He passed away in 2017, but left pretty incredible legacy, because now that I've stepped into this world, it's really blossomed where I'm never going to be the same. It's like I'm stepping into my adulthood. I've been living in this in my past for so long, in my childhood anger and tendencies and things that I wasn't even aware of, because this is all in the unconscious. But now that I'm aware of the fact that this is what's causing my pain, I'm diving full steam ahead. I'm diving all the way in, going to therapy, using this app and educating myself, reading all these books, Dr. John Sarno's books, and then Dr. Joe Dispenza as well. All of his stuff is about reprogramming your mind to create the future that you want. And that's a great place to start. So what I think is really interesting about the divided mind is how much he talks about Freud, and how Freud kind of split up and conceptualized our minds. So he says Freud defined 3 components of the human mind: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is the childish, self-centered, primate part of the mind. One might describe the ego as the captain, the chief executive, the decision maker of the mind. Freud saw the superego as the moral, responsible, ethical element of the psyche. The ego and the superego operate in both the conscious and unconscious areas of the mind. In other words, we are aware of much, but not all of the mental activities associated with these components. The id, which is the childish, selfish, primitive part of us, operates entirely in the unconscious, and we have no direct awareness of it. It is appropriate to point out, as Freud does, that one cannot divide the mind into the neat compartments suggested by the id, the ego, and the superego. They represent characteristics or tendencies of the mind, which, however, acts as a single unit, the action representing the sum of all the factors at work in the mind at any given moment. We should refer to this unit as the self, the individual. If we do, the id can be seen as the evolutionary core of the individual, while the ego and the superego represent later developments designed to enhance the chance of survival. The nature of the id, its power, its character, its emotional makeup, is central to any understanding of how mind-body medicine works. So this is also referred to as mind-body medicine, mind-body philosophies. And this is really important to understand because it's not like we know that there's this, if you aren't introduced to this kind of thinking, you'll never really understand that you have this suppressed emotion, rage or sadness or anger inside of you, because we think, you know, like, who am I to, I'm a good person. I don't really get angry. And I believe this about myself as well. Like, I don't really get angry very often. Like, nothing really gets me too pissed off. Pretty peaceful person. I like to have fun, enjoy life, but like, do I really have anger inside of me? And that is the id. That is the unconscious. It's the narcissistic, self-centered, you know, just kind of childlike part of us where all this repressed emotion is stored. He continues, the ego interprets the world for the id and protects it from the world. To fulfill its function, it must be rational, logical, and aware of time. But of course, the ego is also aware of the id's demands and reactions. In fact, Freud pictured the ego as being under siege from both the demands of the id and the pressures of everyday life. He believed these combined pressures led inevitably to anxiety in the ego. And as if things were not complicated enough, the mind has developed still another trait, the superego, that Freud viewed in moral terms. As he saw it, the superego insists that you not only have to survive, but you have to survive as a successful, achieving individual. My own experience with psychosomatic disorders adds still another dimension to the superego's influence. You must not only be moral, you must be a saint. You must be perfect and good. The pressures we put on ourselves and the workings of the superego infuriate the id. All the narcissistic id wants to do is gratify its desires for comfort, pleasure, and dependency, but instead is being pressured to be a responsible adult. The result may be emotional pain, sadness, anger, and, cumulatively, rage. To the pain and anger generated in childhood, we now add the emotions arising from the conflict between the residual child primitive in all of us and the pressures imposed by life, personal relationships, job, social obligations, and so on, and the superego. While the id is entirely unconscious, the ego and superego function in both the conscious and the unconscious realms of mental emotional life. Because it is the educator and guardian of the self, one must conclude that it is the ego, perhaps at the behest of the superego, that decides on the protective strategy of repression, which is then reinforced by psychosomatic symptoms. The ego is aware of dangerous going-ons in the unconscious, and that these feelings are striving to become conscious. So it takes steps, sometimes dramatic steps, to see that the danger and emotional pain remains contained. My experience with TMS has convinced me that the purpose of this repression is to protect the individual, to prevent the painful, dangerous feelings from coming to consciousness and causing even greater distress. The psychosomatic symptoms that accompany this repression, while sometimes extremely distressing, are not some form of punishment, but are generated to distract the conscious mind and therefore to assist the process of repression. The psychosomatic symptoms, whether pain, discomfort, depression, or whatever, are activated solely to reinforce repression and protect the person from mental pain or discomfort. It's a lot to take in, so I'm making these videos in large part for me to understand, because if you could teach something, that helps you understand it in a much deeper level. So bear with me. I'm just a student here as well. So there's the id, the ego, and the superego, the three parts of what makes up the self. The id is unconscious only. It's underneath the surface. It's the child who just wants to be catered for and doesn't want to grow up, doesn't want to do anything difficult. Just want to, pleasure seeking, and everything's about them. There's the ego, which is driving the ship. That is who we are. That is trying to exist in society and, just kind of move forward. and it exists in both the unconscious and the conscious. So it realizes that we have to do certain things in life, that we have to grow up, and we can't just get angry, at any little thing that makes us upset. And then there's the super ego, which is society at large. It makes us, it's our conscious. And it's interesting how he says that there are, you can't just compartmentalize these three parts of the self neatly all the time. It's not like you say, oh, well, I mean, you could probably sense that, okay, this is the id. This is my just like random suppressed anger coming out of me. Like, why should I be so pissed off about this? Because that's the id, the child, the primate inside of you getting angry, which is important. And then there's the conscience as well, which says like you shouldn't be mad about this. You should take care of your parents. You should not be mad about having kids. And it says, no, I want this all to be about me. So there's these three parts of our being that are in uh, conflict at all times, and we don't understand that. And the ego is repressing these emotions that the id is feeling, um, so it doesn't cause real danger in the real world. So it doesn't, you don't lose your shit at the grocery store and over something that happened in childhood, and you get triggered. So it represses these emotions to save you from the physical or just the real damage, um, emotional damage. And it does that by distracting you with physical pain. That's what's going on here. And um, so he says the heart of the psychosomatic process is to keep painful and dangerous emotions repressed and hidden in the unconscious, because these emotions would wreak havoc were they allowed to become conscious. The unconscious is a domain, and this is the id, a realm that is home to a variety of concepts, thoughts, ideas, feelings, traits, and tendencies. Or it's not just the id. The id is part of the unconscious mind. Some are positive, pleasant, socially acceptable, and some are negative, violent, obscene, childish, some dangerous and threatening. Some are simply too painful and sad to be consciously experienced. And this is important. He says Freud and his followers considered psychosomatic manifestations as a form of illness representing defective personalities. I strongly disagree. Psychosomatic phenomena are not a form of illness. It must be seen as a part of the human condition to which everyone is susceptible. They include a wide range of disorders, some very serious, even life-threatening, but our view is that they may all be traced back to the primeval conflict between our two minds, the unconscious and the conscious. Each is reacting in the only way it knows how to the pressures of everyday life. And I mean, yeah, so we're going to keep moving forward here. Why I'm making this video is because, first of all, like I said, to understand myself, what I'm going through, and how to understand my own suppressed emotions. But it's almost hard to see, like, what repressed emotions do I have? Okay, so I know that there are repressed emotions, but now how do I actually work through it? What do I do? And today, mom, my brother, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, but it is part of my therapeutic process. I was talking to them on FaceTime, and I was just triggered by just childhood feelings of being just a little brother and little things that annoy me. And I hung up like after the call, and I just started journaling, and all this stuff came out. Um, Rage, like I was like just pissed off, and I felt like I've just never been able to voice this anger inside of me that comes from that relationship between me and my mom and my brother. It was us. My parents were divorced, and it was us for so much of the time, just us three. And I think there was a big moment in my brother's life where he was very vocal in his emotions as a kid, and there's one point where he wants to kind of learn about it at this school, and he came back and was just a different person. There was much less anger, and it feels like we never really fought the same since then. We would brawl as little kids. One time, we were brawling on the marble floor, and my mom ran outside screaming and pulled this guy in off the street and told us he was a cop and got us to break up the fight. So that's kind of stuff that was going on. And we never really fought the same after that. I don't think we ever had another fist fight. And he was just much nicer. But I think since then, I had the realization that I never had that same thing. I never processed a lot of the anger inside of me. And my family kind of comes from one specific field, from the entertainment industry. And my whole life, I grew up in that. And I never connected to it. In fact, I despised it. It made me so angry, just this world of what seemed so fake to me, and these people just trying to, climb the social ladder and look good, of all these, just this, all this shit that seems so fake. And in part, I think it's why I had to go to Japan. I'm in Japan now. I think as much as I love my family, I had to get away. And that's part of the internal conflict. And that's how you see the three parts of the mind at once, working together. It's like the id is this rage that I literally felt this morning after the call, of just feeling like a kid again and like so pissed off. Um, and then there's the ego, the part of me that's like, I maybe over the years have told myself like, oh, you've settled that. You're like your best friends now with your brother. You don't fight anymore. You love him. And I never really processed all that anger that I was storing inside of me as a little kid, because while he was quite vocal, I would do the opposite. I would shut down and just be quiet. And that is just fuel for the fire. That is just my emotions just being, you know, suppressed inside of me and bottled up. And I didn't know what to say as a kid. I didn't know how to voice my opinion, or I just didn't want to add more fuel or anger to the difficult situation we were in. And it's that conflict of like, you should, what do you have to be angry about anymore? You solve that. And that's why many of us, it's hard to accept that this is really going on. This is the reason for our pain, because we believe we are good people. You know, we don't get angry. We don't feel, don't have a rage inside of us. Like, that sounds kind of crazy, but no, like there's poison inside of us. And until we confront that, it's gonna just fester and it remains. And it came out of me. And I think a big realization is that it's not only okay to feel these things, but it is more than necessary. You have to, and journaling is a huge part of this whole process, journaling every single day. Um, you can't let the ego pretty much take control and um, rationalize that you shouldn't feel anger or sadness or anything. You have to let the id, the unconscious, just kind of go on a reign of terror and just say what it needs to say. So I wrote a letter to my brother. I'm not going to give it to him or anything unless he watches this and he's interested. And I wonder too, um, if it's necessary to speak to the people directly about this stuff, to talk to your parents or your siblings or whatever, or if it's good enough to just like journal about it and work through it with a therapist. Like, I have my second therapy session later today. Very excited because got a lot to talk about. And so you have to just act like that kid again. Let that kid just rage and get it out of you, because it is poison. And until you confront it, it doesn't go anywhere. I'm going to walk through just what Dr. John Sarno says. So these are just a lot of the ways to know. Um, that you need a release, that you need some help in this, because it's not just chronic pain, it's really anything that afflicts us physically, headaches, migraines, and, you know, stuff with our stomach and back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain. It's kind of the most common, but it's anything, depression, anxiety. It's all these stored, suppressed emotions that we got to get out of us, and work through. So this is this is the process. I'm gonna lay it out here. So read the entire book you're using at a time. So either healing chronic back pain or just healing chronic pain, but I'm sorry, healing back pain, or the mind body prescription. Um, if you don't read those, that's okay, because the next part will be very helpful as well. So it says, set a time every day to review the material I'm about to suggest. Unconscious, painful, and threatening feelings are what necessitates the pain. They are inside you. You don't feel them. Make a list of all the things that may be contributing to those feelings. Write an essay, the longer the better, about each item on your list. This will force you to focus in depth on the emotional things of importance in your life. There are a number of possible sources of those feelings. Anger, hurt, emotional pain, sadness generated in childhood will stay with you all your life because there's no such thing as time in the unconscious. Feelings experienced in the unconscious at any time in a person's life, including childhood, are permanent. That's why the last part is very important, that just because I felt that we moved on, maybe after that day where I clearly remember my brother coming home and like just being much kinder. And I was like, okay, it's over. We moved on. But that pain was still inside of me. That's really interesting. It says there's no such thing as time in the unconscious. Feelings experienced in the unconscious at any time in a person's life, including childhood, are permanent. Very worth knowing until you work through them. Physical, sexual, or emotional abuse will leave large amounts of pain and sadness, but not receiving adequate emotional support, enough warmth, and love will also result in anger, sorrow, and pain. Maybe never felt as a child, but always there in the unconscious. Such things as excessive discipline or unreasonable expectations will also leave emotional marks. Anything that prevents a child from being a child falls into this category and should be put on your list. In most people with TMS, certain personality traits make the greater contribution to the internal emotional pain and anger. Put these at the head of your list. If you expect a great deal of yourself, if you drive yourself to be perfect, to achieve, to succeed, if you are your own severest critic, if you're very conscientious, these are likely to make you very angry inside. This is interesting because these seem like positive qualities, and they are. You know, the world tells us they are, and they are. It is good to care about other people. It's good to, you know, want to do good in the world and want to progress and make things happen and be a responsible citizen of society. But it's that id. That's why it's important to understand that it's the id and the unconscious that is creating these. That's just where the negative emotions are stored. So on the surface, there's the pressure of the superego, the conscious, and the ego, which is really the captain of the ship, which is trying to just kind of full steam ahead, keep things going as they should. Then the id feels those negative emotions unconsciously. It's like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm pissed off about this, yada, yada. And that is what we need to address. All right, we continue. Um, Sensitivity to criticism and deep down feelings of inferiority are common and also contribute to inner anger. In fact, feelings of inferiority may be the major reason we strive to be perfect and good. So it's very common for people with TMS to be perfectionists, to want to be good. And I put the pressure on myself. Like, I just want to be good. Nothing really else matters but being a good person. That's a lot of pressure, because that means that whenever I feel these negative tendencies, very human qualities, I maybe label them as bad. And it's, I repress those things when, now I'm just seeing so many signs of ways that I am feeling this repressed anger. And like last night, I just get like these like jolts of energy. And last night I was feeling it, and I just started like wailing on my pillow. I just needed to get it out. Like I had energy inside of me that like I wish I just had like a punching bag that I could just work on. I actually might like join a boxing gym just to like get some of this out of me and just do it in a healthy way. Because it's good to have anger. It's good to channel it in positive ways. We're not supposed to be just these perfect human beings, and that's pressure. We all feel this stuff. To get it out healthfully, to understand it is important. We should real, be real people who feel the gamut, the wide breadth of human emotion, but are able to understand it and peel the veil back and look at it. That is really important, to not deny that these are in fact living inside of us, these real emotions, you know? Acceptance, as he says, full acceptance that this is the case, not just hoping and believing, but accepting, which means, okay, I don't just believe that maybe this is possible, but I accept this is in fact the truth. Until you do that, you're not going to change. Um, if you have a strong need to please people, to want them to like you, or if you tend to be very helpful to everyone and anyone, if you're the caretaker type and you're always worrying about your family, friends, and relatives, these drives will make you furious inside because that's the way the mind works. The child in our unconscious doesn't care about anyone but itself and gets angry at the pressures to be perfect and good, just as the inner mind reacts against being perfect or good. It also resents any kind of life pressure. So you should put on your list anything in your life that represents pressure or responsibility, like your job, your spouse, your children, your parents, if you're married, if you have kids, if your parents are alive, and of course, any big problems that are going on in your life. A subtle but important source of inner anger in some people is the fact that they are getting old and also that they are mortal. This is more common than you would think. Consciously, we rationalize. Unconsciously, we're enraged. Close personal relationships, no matter how good they are often the source of unconscious anger because it's very hard to be consciously angry at a parent, a spouse, or a child. Add to your list those situations in which you become consciously angry or annoyed but cannot express it, whatever the reason may be. That suppressed anger is internalized and becomes part of the reservoir of rage that brings on TMS. Angers we talked about above are repressed. You don't feel them, you don't know they're there. So that's it. That's what's going on. And as I'm learning more and more about this, I will continue wading through the ocean of information, and hopefully you can learn some from this when I'm going through and maybe apply it to your own life as well. But I think it's very fascinating, and as I'm trying to internalize, this is not just to heal my back pain, this is to understand myself at a much deeper level, to make peace with my past and my childhood, and to finally step into the future that I know I deserve and I am capable of. A life that's free of pain and life that's meaningful. And it's so much more meaningful because of these wounds and these things we go through. So don't see it as a negative thing. See it as the most beautiful trip that you can take in life. Is getting to know yourself.